Whoa, you caught me by surprise there. But you know what? I'm glad you're here, in my beautiful home, which we recently bought with our YouTube ad revenue money. Anyway, I was about to watch Sega's official trailer for the Sega Genesis Mini 2. I'm gonna react to each game in the trailer, and at the end of the video, I'm gonna decide, right here, with you, whether or not we're actually gonna pre-order a Sega Genesis Mini 2 for $100. We'll go through each game and award it a thumbs up or a thumbs down. If we get 45 out of 60 thumbs up, then we will consider that a passing score, and we'll go ahead, and at the end of this video, we'll actually pre-order the Sega Genesis Mini 2. But if not, if this lineup, as revealed by the trailer we're about to watch, gets anything more than 25 thumbs down out of 60 games, then we will use that $100 to buy myself a new Landy Yachts Dinghy Coffin XL Drizzle with this wicked graphic of Nosferatu drinking champagne in the rain. Not human blood, but champagne. Now that's classy. So what's it gonna be? Sega Genesis Mini 2? Or a new skateboard that I've really been wanting? Let's watch this trailer, react, and find out. Okay, here we go. First, it looks like we've got Super Hang-On.
Super Hang-On returns with 2 awesome races. Race around the world on 4 tracks and rock out to 4 music stations. Engage your turbo to speed up to 200 miles per hour, or win races to power up your bike in original mode.
Yeah, Super Hang-On was one of the best racers on the Genesis. No one talks about it anymore, but I love it. Thumbs up. Next is Truxton.
In this classic Toaplan hit, engage the Gitan aliens with your arsenal of weapons. The Power Shot, the Truxton Beam, the Thunder Laser, and the Destroyer Bomb features an option to play the BGM at its original arcade speed.
Wow. So it sounds like Sega and M2 have monkeyed around with Truxton a bit to make the background music match the speed of the arcade. Believe it or not, some shmup experts over the years have noticed that the Genesis version is out of whack. But even without the fix, Truxton is a classic fun space shooter. Thumbs up. Next is Phantasy Star 2.
Experience the classic RPG that changed the genre as we know it. Rolf and Nee set off on a mission to unravel a mystery. Why are biomonsters wreaking havoc across the planet? Includes adjustable movement speed and a new easy mode.
So it looks like Sega's altered Phantasy Star 2 as well. They probably made leveling up quicker and boosted stats, which is nice because this game was brutally difficult back in the day. But my brother and I did in fact beat it the summer of 1990. It was one of the first must-have games for the Genesis, and this is an easy thumbs up. Next is Herzog's Y.
Play the real-time strategy game that sparked the RTS genre. Build your base, deploy your troops, and fight for control of relay stations around the city on your mission to conquer the enemy base. Can you win the title of Supreme Commander?
This is possibly my all-time favorite Genesis game. It's a bit tricky to learn at first, but it's a blast to play. With friends, once you understand the flow and the controls. It's a real-time strategy game from almost 10 years before it was an essential game genre. Thumbs up. Next is Afterburner 2.
Take to the skies in your F-14 Tomcat for epic dogfights and intense aerial battles. Lock onto your targets and shoot down enemy formations with your machine gun or a barrage of homing missiles.
Afterburner 2 on the Genesis is a really short and vanilla rail shooter from 1990 that failed to recreate the intensity of the original arcade classic. Sega's promoting an expensive arcade stick to make this more exciting, but I think it's just okay. Thumbs down. Next is Rainbow Islands Extra.
When Bubby's friends are captured, it's up to him to rescue them in this Bubble Bobble spin-off. Island hop across 2 different modes, the classic original mode and new extra mode, which features brand new enemies.
Rainbow Islands is a fun arcade-style platformer by Taito, but I don't think the Genesis port ever came to North America. The announcer voice from Sega talks about an extra mode, but from what I gather, Extra is the name of the original game, which was a remix of the arcade game. I see no evidence to suggest that this port is any different from the Japanese original, or that the original arcade version is actually included here. Either way, this is a pretty cool game. Thumbs up! Next is The Revenge of Shinobi.
An action game starring Joe Musashi of the Oboro clan, a modern-day ninja. Battle the evil group Neo Zed with his deadly Hasao Shuriken attack and potent ninjutsu. Features an acclaimed soundtrack by Yuzo Koshiro.
Revenge of Shinobi is my favorite Shinobi game ever made, and one of my top 5 favorite Sega Genesis games. Sadly, this is not likely to be the original version, which featured Batman, Spider-Man, Godzilla, Rambo, the Terminator, and the Flying Nun. Still, it's one of the best action platformers on the Genesis, and has one of the greatest game soundtracks of all time. Big thumbs up. Next is Hellfire.
Our galaxy is being devoured by Super Mech. In Messiah's remake of Toaplan's Shoot 'em Up, cycle through 4 different weapons to destroy the mechanoids and save the galaxy, featuring new features and options for the Genesis.
Hellfire is a pretty cool space shooter, even on a system that was known for amazing space shooters. I think it's most famous for its hilarious congratulations screen when you beat the game on the hardest setting. I'm not sure if Sega's official synopsis in the trailer is correct about this version of Hellfire being different from the Sega Genesis version. I think it's probably the same game, which obviously is a bit different from the arcade original. It's a shmup, thumbs up. Next is Granada.
In this classic fast-paced shoot-'em-up by Wolf Team, command the Hypertech Cannon Tank, Granada! Wield shields, interceptors, homing missiles, and other high-powered weapons against the super-powered mechs of the future.
Granada is one of the best games ever developed by Wolf Team or published by Renovation. It was recently published on the Renovation Collection for the Evercade, so I'm surprised to see it here, but I'm also glad because Granada is a true hidden gem. Easy thumbs up. Next is Populous.
Play as God in this classic simulation game. Unleash natural disasters, lead your followers to prosperity, and bring destruction on your enemies. When Doomsday comes, will your people prevail?
It's great to see Electronic Arts here, and their port of Populous for the Genesis was really good in its time. If you're up to trying something that's sim-heavy and different. I really loved this game back in the day, even though it was definitely more suited to a PC playstyle, with a mouse pad and all that stuff. Thumbs up! Next is Shadow Dancer.
The legendary shinobi is back on the streets of New York with his trusty dog Yamato. Use shuriken, ninja swords, and deadly ninjutsu to fight an army of vicious lizard ninjas and liberate the city from the evil reptilian Soros.
The evil reptilian Soros? Are they talking about George Soros? That nice Hungarian philanthropist who wants to feed me insects and free me of the burden of personal liberty and private property? That's weird. Shadow Dancer is weird, being a shinobi game set in the future and utilizing an awesome attack dog, but sometimes weird really is great. Sometimes. This isn't the best shinobi game on the Sega Genesis, but it's still one of the best action platformers. Thumbs up for Shadow Dancer. Next is Gain Ground.
Choose 3 warriors from an elite group of 20 unique characters. Venture into a strange and deadly world of war simulation gone berserk, and rescue captives to grow your team. The missions only get more intense in 2-player co-op mode.
Gain Ground is a really odd game with ugly graphics, excellent strategy-laden run-and-gun gameplay, and a very catchy theme song. It kinda reminds me of football with how you have to get your avatars across the field. Thumbs up! Next is Midnight Resistance.
Dramatic battles and iconic music intensify the classic combat of this highly influential action game. Can Resistance soldier Johnny Ford fight his way through enemy compounds and defeat the evil head to rescue his kidnapped family?
I don't know, but Midnight Resistance was the best Contra clone on the Sega Genesis. It's stupid short, but the gameplay is crazy, and the soundtrack truly is something special. Thumbs up. Next is Shining in the Darkness.
In this first entry in the classic Shining series, a knight and his allies fight the fiendish forces of Dark Soul to restore peace to the enchanted kingdom of Thornwood. Explore towns and dungeons in stunning first-person panoramic 3D.
Shining in the Darkness is a fairly straightforward dungeon crawler, but it has exceptional hand-drawn 16-bit artwork that looks like a Walt Disney Studios production. The original Shining series kicks ass, so thumbs up. Next is Outrun.
Hop into the iconic red sports car and speed through 15 gorgeous stages in this genre-defining racing game. Select from 4 radio stations featuring new tracks not featured in the original.
So once again, Sega's official synopsis off the Mega Drive Mini 2 trailer is a bit deceptive. The 4-song feature here is not actually new. This extra song is only new in relation to the arcade cabinet. But still, Outrun is an essential Sega classic. Thumbs up. Next is Bonanza Brothers.
Welcome to Badville, where villains and gangsters rule. Sneak through levels, grab the goods, and steer clear of the cops in this rip-roaring action game. Play solo or with 2-player split-screen co-op to rake in the treasure.
Bonanza Brothers is a fantastic co-op game about being clever and fast on your feet. Don't let the goofy presentation dissuade you, because this game is a real good time, even if you play as the bad guys. Thumbs up. Next is Rolling Thunder 2.
Take on the role of super spies Albatross and Layla as they work to destroy evil organization Neo Gelda. Play solo or team up with a fellow agent for killer 2-player action that spans the globe from breezy Miami to scorching Giza.
Rolling Thunder 2 is a port of a Namco arcade game that's the sequel to the game that inspired the original Shinobi, and thus Rolling Thunder 2 plays a bit like Shadow Dancer. Only Rolling Thunder 2 has this beautiful city pop vibe and offers 2-player simultaneous co-op. It's one of Namco's best games on the Genesis, and this is a major thumbs up. Next is Golden Axe 2.
Chop down the forces of evil in this intense sequel to the classic sword and sorcery action game. Axe Battler Tyrus Flare and Gillis Thunderhead set off to defeat the dreaded Dark Gold and reclaim the legendary Golden Axe.
Golden Axe 2 is not as good as the original, especially with reference to its soundtrack, but it's still one of the best beat-em-ups on the Sega Genesis, so this is a thumbs up. Next is Desert Strike.
Climb aboard the Super Apache attack chopper and get ready to burn up the skies in this isometric shooter by EA. Take out terrorist camps, destroy Scuds, ICBMs, and chemical weapons plants through 30 deadly missions.
Desert Strike is a very pleasant surprise indeed, and I think it's unequivocally EA's best game for the Sega Genesis. I loved roaming and exploring this game's relatively large and open levels as a kid. Too bad there's no cheater options included, because invincibility codes made exploring this brutally difficult game a bit more fun. But still, what a triumph. Desert Strike is a huge thumbs up for me. Next is Warsong.
Rally your allies and lead their armies to battle the evil empire and retrieve the legendary Blade Warsong. Command troops, unite allies, and defeat evil through 20 dramatic scenarios as the gallant Prince Garrett.
I have limited experience with Warsong, but I know it's actually an entry in the popular Langrisser series, and that it has a cult following of hardcore strategy gamers who have written entire tomes explaining this game's many deep idiosyncrasies. I would probably love this if I gave it some time, so it's a thumbs up from me. Next is Atomic Runner.
Alien invaders are here to conquer Earth, but not if Chelnov can help it. Run, jump, and fight with 6 different weapons, with 3 levels of power-ups to beat back the alien invasion and their cybernetic robot army.
Chelnov! Atomic Runner is low-key one of the best and strangest side-scrolling shooters on the Genesis. Combining elements of a platformer with the shmup, the result is a kinda endless runner with heavy firepower, unique crazy enemies, fun levels, and a killer soundtrack. This is the best Data East game on the Genesis for sure. Thumbs up. Next is Splatterhouse 2.
When your girlfriend is trapped in a living nightmare, it's up to you to save her. Play through a horror movie and hack, slash, and chainsaw your way through legions of oozing zombies and ghastly ghouls in this Genesis sequel.
Splatterhouse 2 is the Sega Genesis exclusive sequel to Namco's horror classic from 1989. If you watch this channel regularly, then you know that we love Splatterhouse on the TurboGrafx 16, but Splatterhouse 2 is even better. This is a thumbs up. Next is Night Trap for the Sega CD.
The line between game and movie blurs in this interactive horror adventure. Switch between cameras to monitor the seemingly normal home for vampire entities. The clock is ticking. Will you be able to capture them all in time?
So Night Trap is our first Sega CD game, which is of course the big draw for the Sega Genesis Mini 2. As a game, Night Trap is nothing more than a glorified surveillance simulator that requires rote memorization and pummels you with terrible acting and writing across numerous FMV sequences. Night Trap is kind of a horrible turd, but as a piece of gaming history, Night Trap is essential and pretty much mandatory for any Sega CD collection. Thumbs up! Next is Sewer Shark for the Sega CD.
Environmental destruction has forced humanity underground, and it's up to you to clear the sewers and transport supplies to hidden human outposts. Features Hollywood tier live action footage and high quality sound.
Sewer Shark is another famous Sega CD game, and my friends and I played it back in the day. We used to call it Shit Shark. This game was, for many, a bitter realization that video clips and CD quality sound were no substitute for actual good gameplay. Indeed, FMV is an acronym for Failed to Make a Video Game. Sewer Shark sucks. Thumbs down. Next is Lightning Force.
The fourth installment of Technosoft's side-scrolling shooter series, 2 years after the decisive battle against the Orn Empire, take control of the Rheinex and battle new enemies with an arsenal of 5 different weapons.
Lightning Force is also known as Thunder Force 4, and while it's not quite as tight and fun to play as Thunder Force 3, Lightning Force has some of the most stunning graphics ever produced for the Sega Genesis. It's an essential Sega shooter, so thumbs up. Next is Ninja Warriors for the Mega CD.
Play as 2 android ninjas on a mission to assassinate an evil dictator in this classic action game by Taito. This version for the Sega CD features arcade widescreen, new BGM tracks, and a cinematic Zunata mode.
The Ninja Warriors is unique here because while the arcade game was known in North America, this Japanese Mega CD port was not. As a side-scrolling beat-em-up, the Ninja Warriors is as basic as it gets, playing on par with games like Kung Fu on the NES or China Warrior on the TurboGrafx-16. But the graphics are pretty cool, and the soundtrack is phenomenal. Thumbs up! Next is Elemental Master.
The creators of Thunder Force bring a brand new fantasy shooting game to the Genesis. Blast your enemies with 5 unique magic attacks through 7 levels, and use the power of the elements to put an end to evil.
Once again, Sega's official description from the Sega Genesis Mini 2 trailer is misleading. Elemental Master is not a brand new fantasy shooting game, but rather it's an old classic developed by Technosoft and released by Renovation in North America in 1993. It's an amazing game that mixes elements of scrolling shooters with running and gunning action. It's kind of like Atomic Runner, only this scrolls vertically as opposed to horizontally. It's a classic, it's a shmup, so thumbs up. Next is Night Striker for the Mega CD.
Arcade giant Taito brings us this high-speed 3D shooter. Pilot the Intergrade and fight through 21 stages to bring justice to a city of the near future. Features BGM swapping exclusive to the Sega CD version.
Night Striker for the Mega CD is a mediocre port of a mediocre arcade game that almost no one remembers. There are far better Sega CD games than this. Thumbs down. Next is Final Fight CD for the Sega CD.
Rescue the mayor's daughter from the clutches of the Mad Gear Gang in this Sega CD port of the hit beat-em-up from Capcom. Play solo or with a friend as you fight through the city, or try to set a new record in time attack mode.
Final Fight CD, on the other hand, is possibly the best port of one of the best arcade games from the late 80s and early 90s. It blew the Super Nintendo version out of the water with the inclusion of 2-player co-op, the inclusion of some guy in orange pajamas as a playable character, and the addition of an arranged CD quality soundtrack that was better than the arcade. Final Fight CD is easily one of the best games on the Sega CD, and it's a huge thumbs up. Next is Echo the Dolphin for the Sega CD.
When a sudden storm tears Echo's family from their home, Echo must travel through time and space to save the dolphins, and, quite possibly, the world, in this revamp of the classic for the Sega CD.
Echo the Dolphin is a game that we already got on the last Sega Genesis Mini. The Sega CD version has a new, even better soundtrack, full of psychedelic new age and ambient bangers, but it's fundamentally the exact same game. And despite Echo's legacy as one of the Genesis' star players, I really don't think that it's actually a good game. The original was historically relevant, but a Sega CD port is beyond redundant. Thumbs down, Sega. Thumbs down. Next is Robo Aleste for the Sega CD.
Mecha meets historical fantasy in this one-of-a-kind shoot-'em-up. Become a shinobi under the command of Oda Nobunaga and pilot the Aleste. Level up each of your 4 unique weapons to do battle against the Evil Alliance.
Robo Aleste is the sequel to Musha on the Sega Genesis and is one of the best shooters ever made for the Sega CD. It was developed by Compile, featured a snappy CD quality soundtrack, and wonderfully cheesy anime style cutscenes. Robo Aleste is great. Thumbs up. Next is Ranger X.
When the Rahuna invade the homeworld,
Have you noticed like 50% of these games are about alien invasions? Anyway,
when the Rahuna invade the homeworld, it's up to Ranger X to fight back and restore peace. Duke it out with 7 different weapons and 2 courier support units to blast the enemies back from whence they came.
Ranger X is a unique side-scrolling game that made use of the ability to partially control one of 2 available secondary vehicles that can be sort of ridden by your main avatar. The results of this gameplay experiment are often tedious and cumbersome, but the graphics are phenomenal. Ranger X isn't exactly a masterpiece, but it is interesting and still manages to be fun once you master its complex controls. Thumbs up. Next is Sylphid for the Sega CD.
After Zakalite and his terrorist organization take over the solar system, it's up to the SA-77 to fight against evil. This vertical scrolling shooter features improved sound and graphics for the Sega CD.
Wow, Sega, talk about underselling Sylphid for the Sega CD, which wasn't just an incredible reimagining of the original Sylphid game that was released for PCs by Game Arts, but thanks to exploiting the Sega CD's FMV capabilities, this version of Sylphid is one of the most impressive looking games ever made for Sega's expensive and disappointing CD attachment. Sylphid was creating the illusion of a full-blown polygonal 3D shooter 2 years before the launch of the Sony PlayStation in North America, and even then, this game still looked good by comparison. Sylphid is, beyond its graphical prowess, a great shooter and one of the best games on the Sega CD. Thumbs up. Next is Sonic CD.
Sonic travels to the shores of Never Lake for the annual appearance of Little Planet, a mysterious world where past, present, and future collide through the power of the time stones that lie hidden within it.
Huh? Sonic CD is regarded by some as the best 2D Sonic game of the 90s. I disagree, but I have to concede that this wacky and often confusing Sonic game is a Sega CD essential, and that it has a wonderful soundtrack that is also not as good as the Japanese version, which is completely different. Some people are reporting that the Genesis Mini 2 version of Sonic CD will be the special widescreen version done by Christian Whitehead, which featured both the US and the Japanese soundtrack interchangeably. But I highly doubt that this is true. This will probably just be the North American version of Sonic CD, and that's good enough. Thumbs up. Next is Toe Jam and Earl, Panic on Funkotron.
The Funky Duo is back in a new action-packed adventure. When Toe Jam and Earl accidentally infest Funkotron with Earthlings, it's up to them to round up the aliens and send them packing. Play solo or with a friend.
There goes Sega of Japan again with their misleading game descriptions. This is not a new game, but it is the incredibly disappointing sequel to one of the Genesis's most iconic and unique games, Toe Jam and Earl, which was an isometric roguelike taking place within a relatively massive, procedurally generated world. Toe Jam and Earl Panic on Funkotron, on the other hand, is a far more straightforward 2D platformer with discrete levels, which was vanilla fare for the early 90s. But this this is still an inventive and fun game with cool presentation that would have fit in on Nickelodeon. It's still a cool game, so thumbs up. Next is Mansion of Hidden Souls for the Sega CD.
Explore the titular mansion in a race against time in this classic horror adventure. Solve the mystery and escape from its ghostly terrors, lest you become trapped in the haunted mansion itself.
Once again, the official description here by Sega is wrong. This is not a horror game, but more of an interactive fantasy story about a magical mansion and people turning into butterflies. It sounds kind of interesting, but it's really not. The graphics and frame rate were never good, even in the early 90s, and nothing that happens is ever compelling or interesting. There's not much of a story here either, just some zany shit happening, people turning into butterflies, I guess. Plus it's super short and yet still manages to be painfully, and I mean excruciatingly slow. Mansion of Hidden Souls sucks. A lot. Thumbs down. Next is Virtual Racing.
This hit arcade game is now available on the Genesis, with a custom Sega virtual processor in the cartridge for enhanced 3D graphics. Switch your camera, view replays, or play split-screen multiplayer.
Virtual Racing is a home port of the Sega arcade classic that utilized a proprietary cheater chip that was intended to unleash the impending 3D revolution on the Sega Genesis, even before the launch of the 32X late the same year. The problem is that despite the additional silicone in the cartridge, which bumped the price up to $100, this was still the worst version of Virtual Racing ever made, and it looks like crap. The 32X version, also released the same year, was a great game. I wish we got that version. Thumbs down. Next is Fatal Fury 2.
SNK's Neo Geo hit comes to the Genesis. In addition to iconic features such as the two-plane system, power attacks, and desperation moves, this new version makes adjustments to game balance, making matches even more thrilling.
Once again, I'm sure there's nothing actually new here, but this is a decent port of SNK's decent arcade game. It's no Street Fighter 2, heck, it's no Mortal Kombat 2 either, but a lot of people do like this old school 2D fighter with its appearance by wrestling superstar Big Van Vader. It's not bad overall. I give this a reluctant thumbs up. Next is Super Street Fighter 2.
The fifth title in Capcom's iconic series, featuring updated graphics and 4 new fighters, Cammy, DJ, T-Hawk, and Bruce Lee. Play classic tournament mode, or try new modes like Group Battle, Tournament Battle, and Time Challenge.
Now this is more like it. At first glance, Super Street Fighter 2 appears to be a mere rehash of Street Fighter 2, but the gameplay is fast and ferocious, and the new characters were an awesome addition. Super Street Fighter 2 might very well be the very best fighting game ever made for the Sega Genesis. Yes, even better than Eternal Champions. Thumbs up. Next is Streets of Rage 3.
Blaze, Axel, and Skate team up with cyborg newcomer Dr. Zan to foil the ultimate evil plot. Battle through the city with jump kicks, power slams, and spin punches to the thumping soundtrack by legendary composer Yuzo Koshiro.
Streets of Rage 3 is the black sheep of the legendary Streets of Rage series, pretty much entirely because of its awful experimental soundtrack that stood in stark contrast to its predecessors. Koshiro utilized a piece of software he created called the Automated Composing System in order to generate a new futuristic sound. The result was about as good as anything that AI ever produces. You know, kinda shitty. But the gameplay, which was also partly Koshiro's fault, was better than ever. In fact, gameplay-wise, I think this might be the best Streets of Rage game ever made, with fast-paced combos, dynamic levels, and the ability to evade attacks with a new useful rolling maneuver. Big thumbs up here. Next is Outrunners.
The ultimate arcade racer speeds on to the Genesis. Play solo or with a friend as you race through tracks from around the world. choose from 8 ultra cool vehicles, and rock out to over 10 different music tracks.
Outrunners on the Genesis is a poorly regarded, inferior-looking port of a Sega arcade game from 1993 that was a sequel to the original Outrun. The worst aspect of this game is the forced split-screen perspective, even in one-player mode. Thumbs down. Next is Shining Force 2.
The classic tactical RPG returns with more strategic combat and an epic story. Assemble your party from a cast of colorful characters and battle your way across the land. Will your Shining Force be able to stop the deadly Xeon?
Shining Force 2 is widely regarded as the best tactical RPG on the Genesis, and, maybe, the single best entry in the beloved Shining series. And I think it's about on par with the original, which is really good. Big thumbs up for the big RPG. Next is Echo, The Tides of Time for the Sega CD.
The journey of Echo the Dolphin continues in this Sega CD exclusive sequel. When the Earth is in peril, Echo teams up with Trelia, a dolphin from the future, to defeat the Vortex and save the world once again.
Once again, ignore Sega here. This is not an exclusive Sega CD game, but a nearly identical version was in fact released on the Genesis, and there was even a port on the Game Gear. Echo Tides of Time is, however, a sequel to the original Echo the Dolphin that provides all of the same beauty, elegance, and extreme frustration and tedious gameplay. It's not what I'd call a good game, but it is interesting, and the Sega CD version with its stellar soundtrack and cutscenes is by far the best. This should have been the one Echo game on here. Thumbs up. Next is Viewpoint.
Sammy's arcade classic comes to the Genesis.
Arcade classic?
Pilot a plane through isometric levels to destroy everything standing between you and ownership of Sega. Collect new stock and seats on the board of directors to make your attacks more deadly and your takeover of Sega last forever.
Remember Viewpoint for the Sega Genesis in 1994? Neither do we. There's probably a good reason for that. Sammy wants us to remember though. I'd rather play Zaxxon. Thumbs down, dudes. Next is, Clay Fighter?
Hop into the ring and kick some clay in this wacky fighting game. Pick from 8 kooky characters, from Bad Mr. Frosty to Ichabod Clay. Then fight your way to the top of the clay pack, either solo or with a friend.
Clay Fighter's lame. The 90s had so many fighting games that it wasn't long before developers began employing goofy gimmicks, and Clay Fighter was among the most desperate and the most goofy. People apparently did like this, but it's a weekend rental for a 2-hour session with friends at best. The joke gets old fast. Thumbs down. Next is Ristar.
Reach for the stars in this action-packed adventure. Ristar and his long elastic arms can grab enemies, climb walls, and swing into the air. Travel through the 7 unique planets of Ristar's solar system to restore peace.
Ristar was released late in the life of the Sega Genesis, just months after Donkey Kong Country in 1994 and months before the launch of the Sega Saturn. Thus, many people overlook this stunning, fantastically fun Sega platformer. I often like to mention that I enjoy this game more than Sonic the Hedgehog. I say it because it's true. Thumbs up. Next is Shining Force CD for the Sega CD.
Join the Shining Force in their valiant struggle to defeat the warmongering Cypress Kingdom in this remake of the legendary Game Gear RPG for the Sega CD. Assemble your party, plan your battle tactics, and emerge victorious.
Shining Force CD is actually a remake of not one, but 2 Game Gear games, Shining Force Gaiden and Shining Force Gaiden 2. Indeed, it goes beyond a remake by introducing new chapters to the Shining Force Gaiden story. Shining Force CD is one of the most beloved games in the Shining franchise, and is perhaps the greatest game ever made for the Sega CD. Thumbs up. Next is Crusader of Senti.
Join Corona and his animal friends as he travels through a monster-infested land in this epic RPG classic. With only a sword in his hand, will our fearless hero survive the treacherous lands and discover the true nature of the world?
Crusader of Sentia has become, in more recent times, one of the most beloved action-adventure games on the Genesis, thanks to its incredible graphics and art style, and unique status as a viable Sega alternative to The Legend of Zelda, though the game was actually developed by Nextech, which would eventually be known as Next Entertainment. It's not bad. Thumbs up. Next is The Ooze.
In this one-of-a-kind top-down action game, it's your turn to be the monster terrorizing a scientific facility. Get your revenge by slithering, stretching, and squelching through the corporation.
The Ooze is one of 2 games developed by Sega of America's Sega Technical Institute that really showed that division's potential. The other game was Comic Zone. Sadly, The Ooze was too little too late in 1995, and thus it stands as STI's last complete commercially released game. The Ooze is different, but in a good way. Thumbs up. Next is Alien Soldier.
Developer Treasure has a challenge for you. Survive this epic boss rush. In this action shooter, fight 25 bosses in a lightning-fast series of battles. Discover their weaknesses and develop a strategy to survive or die trying.
Alien Soldier was originally only released in Japan and briefly on the Sega channel. It is one of the most spectacular Genesis games ever made, with heavy emphasis on tough boss fights, problem solving, and came with a complex control scheme that takes practice to master. It's an intense, beautiful game that rewards diligence. A true gem if there ever was one. Thumbs up. Next is Earthworm Jim 2.
Save Princess What's-Her-Name from the clutches of the evil Psychro. In this second game featuring everyone's favorite dirt-eating superhero. Heart-pumping action, silky smooth animation, and harebrained antics await.
I've never been a big fan of Earthworm Jim, but a lot of people love this aesthetically brilliant and often hilarious side-scrolling action game. In many ways, Earthworm Jim 2 represents Shiny Entertainment's greatest achievement, right before they sold the company to Interplay and effectively aborted a thriving franchise. Thumbs up! Next is Sonic 3D Blast.
The Blue Hedgehog with Attitude is back in an all-new 3D adventure. Find, free, and guide the flickies to safety in 7 massive action-packed 3D zones. But beware, Dr. Robotnik and his giant robot won't be happy.
Guys, I don't know who made this trailer, but Sega wrote this stuff, not me. Beware, Dr. Robotnik's giant robot won't be happy. Well, neither will you, because Sonic 3D Blast sucks. It's a bumbling, sluggish mess. Thumbs down. Vector Man 2.
Vector Man is back for more enemy blasting action. Transform into powerful new configurations or use the special assimilation morph to take on your enemy's appearance. 22 action-packed levels crawling with mutant insects awaits.
Vector Man 2 came out in 1996, well into the next generation of consoles, and is one of the last Genesis games ever made. It's also one of the most graphically impressive. However, like its predecessor, Vector Man is rich in ideas, and yet a bit low on the execution. Level designs are haphazard, and as with the original, the screen is zoomed in way too much to see incoming enemies. There's a lot to appreciate here, but I don't think Vector Man or its sequel are essential Genesis games. I don't even find them fun, to be honest. Thumbs down. Well, that's all 60 games, and sadly, we only managed to accrue 42 thumbs up, and if you recall, I stipulated a minimum of 45 in order to be persuaded over to making a pre-order for the Sega Genesis Mini 2.
An extra bonus game is also included.
What? What's that? Bonus content? Well, let's go! First up is Fantasy Zone.
The first game in this iconic series is now on the Genesis, with a brand new Easy mode. Explore 8 planets as Opa Opa to save the galaxy, defeat enemies, collect coins, and buy power-ups to enhance your ship.
Fantasy Zone for the Genesis is a completely new version of the game by M2. This is really exciting because this is a very fun and inventive space shooter that I happen to love. M2 pulled a similar trick on the TurboGrafx 16 Mini, and I can't help but wonder if this version isn't related. Big thumbs up here. We're up to 43 thumbs up, and next is Star Mobile.
30 years after its development was paused, this one-of-a-kind puzzle game comes to the Genesis. Carefully drop the differently weighted stars onto the board to try and make the scale balance.
Star Mobile was a puzzle game on the Sharp X68000 computer, and it was ported to the PC Engine CD, but the planned Mega Drive port was abandoned for mysterious reasons. I can think of one good reason: this game totally sucks. Thumbs down. Next is Spatter.
Hop on your tricycle to pedal to pick all the flowers, but don't get caught by the monsters. Jump at the fence to send your enemies flying helter-skelter in all directions in this Genesis port of the 1984 arcade classic.
What the heck is Spatter? And why are we dealing with obscure arcade games from the early 80s? This looks like a very fun arcade game, sort of an overhead take on the flicky concept, but why is it here? I can't give this a thumbs up or a thumbs down. This is just bewildering. Next is Super Locomotive.
The fast-paced, track-switching arcade game choo-choos its way onto the Genesis. Keep careful watch in both the upper and lower screens to avoid enemy attacks as you rush to the next station.
Super Locomotive is a Sega arcade game that came out in 1982, the year E.T. came out. That's over 40 years ago. And it's an incredibly unique game with unbelievable music and graphical presentation for the time period. Truly, this is an awesome looking game, but why is it on the Genesis Mini 2? This is so freaking weird to me. Again, I can't give this a thumbs up or a thumbs down. Next is Devi and Pi.
This game never saw the light of day until now. When Taro and Hanako get turned into paddles, it's up to you to save the angel Pi while dodging the demonic Devi's attacks. Play solo, 2-player co-op, or versus mode.
Devi and Pi is allegedly an unreleased Sega game developed by Takashi Iizuka in 1993, just before he began working on Sonic 3. From what I gather, it looks to be a colorful version of Pong, or video table tennis, but with angels and demons getting in the middle somehow. It's probably neato, but I can't get excited about a game no one's played before, so no thanks. Next is Puyo Puyo Sun, aka Puyo Puyo 3.
The 2-player versus mode from the third game in the iconic series plops onto the Genesis for the first time, featuring faithfully recreated animations and powerful sun Puyos that can turn the tide of battle.
Okay, so this is amazing. Puyo Puyo Sun came out to arcades in 1996, was ported to the Japanese Saturn, N64, and PlayStation respectively, but the Sega Genesis never got this game. This is being presented as a new version of Puyo Puyo Sun, as if it had been released on the Genesis. Thus, this is basically a brand new Genesis game. Puyo Puyo's a great series, and it's really cool that they'd go through the trouble here to do this. Big thumbs up. That's 44 thumbs up. Next is Space Harrier 2.
Sega enthusiasts once asked, what if the Genesis could handle sprite scaling? Wonder no longer. This 3D classic gets a revamp thanks to modern technology, creating a game experience more akin to the arcade version.
Space Harrier 2 was an original launch game for the Genesis in both North America and Japan. It was a bold attempt at a sequel to an arcade classic, but sadly it suffered from a horrendously low frame rate that made playing the game unbearable. What Sega has done here, as you can see from the smooth scaling in the trailer, is completely fix the game by not relying upon the limitations of a CPU from 1988, but rather whatever system on a chip is powering the Genesis Mini 2. That's awesome. Plus, it looks to me like this trailer is giving away the possibility that the original Space Harrier game is being included as a hidden game. Well, that's a big thumbs up. That's it. We did it. Just barely, but we did it. We went through all the confirmed games for the Sega Genesis Mini and gave a thumbs up or down to every game that we could, including the so-called bonus content. We needed 45 thumbs up to convince me to actually buy one of these, and it was close. It came down to the very last game, Space Harrier 2, which was broken and is now being fixed, but we crossed the threshold. That's 45 thumbs up for the Sega Genesis Mini 2. And so now here I go. I'm just gonna go on Amazon here and pre-order the Sega Genesis Mini 2, which comes out at the end of October. $99? Sure. Fine. $30 shipping and handling? What? Is it coming from outer space? Is it gonna land in my backyard encased in a space capsule from another world? Damn, Sega. I guess I have no choice. I've come this far, so I'll pay it. Thank you all very much for coming by to watch Sega's remarkably lazy trailer for the Sega Genesis Mini 2. And thank you to all the people who subscribe to our channel and don't skip the ads, so we can afford this beautiful photoshopped home that we pretend to live in with our at least 4 children. Your continued support makes all of this possible. You can look forward to our full review of the Sega Genesis Mini 2, which we will start working on the moment our unit arrives from outer space, sometime in late October or early November. Until next time, bye bye now.